Greetings, viewers. This is CP666 signing on for what might be an open and shut basket case, but might not be. It is an AIC Systems Premium build. You can see here's the case. Pretty nice case. Opens up to reveal a little LCD display. I love these things. Turbo switch, reset switch, all your LEDs, and a power switch. But you'll notice a bunch of stuff missing. I always found it odd that these things had blanks that looked like a floppy drive. I'm not sure why somebody decided that would be a good idea. The hard drive is still in place. It's actually a Quantum Trailblazer. I'm not sure of the size. 840 AT is what it says on it. So that would be 840 megabytes. The motherboard is nothing really terrifically special. It looks like... I would have thought that it was an ASUS board, but I don't see any determining markings anywhere on it. And I really don't see any markings at all, other than MB8433UUD-A. I might go look that up and find out what that is. 2 of the 4 RAM slots are populated. The one big problem is that it uses a clock chip, which you might be able to see down there. That Odin OEC 12C887A. It's a Dallas 12887A clone, but it's not socketed, so I'm going to have to pull this board out and replace that because I know it's bad, which is why I have this machine in the first place. It's not terrifically useful if the clock chip isn't functional and holding the settings. Looks like you get 4 ISA slots and 3 PCI, although a couple of the PCI are taken up by the serial, parallel, and... has that got 2 serial ports? Yeah, it's got a 25-pin and a 9-pin serial. And of course, it's the VGA. That's just a PCI Mach 64. Nothing particularly special. The power supply, being a baby AT system, is a 200-watt power supply. And there's the hookup diagram. ATX was a big improvement over these AT power supplies because with the AT design, you can see that big black cable right there. That routes 120 volts straight to the front of the case. If you nicked that cable, either by accident or whatever, you could have a bad time because it would then put voltage on your case. Oh, what fun that was. Like I said, this is a 486 motherboard, but it's interesting in that the 486, it's an AMD 486, is not your typical clock speed. We'll take a look at that here in a minute. Okay, so some quick research determines that this is actually a BioStar motherboard. And if we look over here, you might be able to see that reflection right there is actually a PS2 port, but is blocked by the case, so that's a little annoying. So the only option that you get is the 5-pin DIN for the keyboard. I think that PS2 plug is actually for a mouse, not for a keyboard. At least that's how it usually was. But there's a couple of problems here. Number one is that there is no floppy drive. In fact, the floppy cable is not even plugged into the motherboard. So that's going to have to get fixed. There is no optical drive either, and there was one. You can see that it clearly had one at some point. And I'm going to have to adjust these blanks because I hate it when the optical drive is lower. Although I guess it really doesn't matter because it's covered up most of the time. I'm going to have to replace that IDE ribbon cable because there is only one ribbon in this case. Unless, of course, the design is to put it as the slave drive, which I don't usually like to do that. I like to have them on their own channel whenever possible to give them the most bandwidth. It's missing a slot blank here. I'm not sure if there was a network card installed or some other card, maybe a data acquisition card. And the PCI video card is missing the screw, so we'll have to put that back. But of course, the bigger issue is that that clock module is not holding any of its settings anymore. And this is one of those boards that requires a good battery in order to keep its time and date settings. So every time you reboot, it loses all memory of whatever was on it. And of course, with that, it loses the hard drive settings. So I don't know if there's really a whole lot I can do with this until I replace that clock module anyway. Maybe I should start sourcing another one. But I'm going to straighten out some of these other problems. I'll get an optical drive, a floppy drive, and an IDE ribbon cable and some screws. I'm not going to deal with this blank yet because I'm probably going to put something there. Or maybe I'll put a blank in if I can happen to find one sitting out. Okay, so I've made my decision as far as a floppy and a CD-ROM goes. Just a standard floppy drive, nothing really special about it. It's the only one I've got with a beige faceplate. Clearly I'm going to have to get more floppy drives. And for the optical drive, as it turns out, I don't really have a whole lot of options for CD drives. I didn't want to put a DVD burner or a DVD-ROM in this because that's way too new. But I suppose even this burner here, this HP CD Writer Plus, is a little bit new as well. But of course it's less new. Does it have a date on it? It should. September of 2000. Yeah, that's pretty late for a 486, but this is a later 486, so I'm going to go ahead and get those in the case here. Okay, well there's no way you're going to be able to see it, but I did put a screw in the video card there. I've also hooked up the floppy drive and the CD-ROM and screwed them in place. They look pretty nice in there. The only thing that I think is probably going to be wrong is that I think I got the floppy drive cable backwards because it wasn't labeled on the motherboard, so I had to make an assumption. So if anything's going to be wrong, it'll probably be that. But it's plugged in, cabled up. Let's see what happens. Yep, I thought so. Floppy drive is backwards. But it is booting, and your eyes do not deceive you. This is, in fact, a 120 megahertz 486 DX4. And it looks like we might have stalled here. Yeah, I think it's stalled out. I'm going to hit a reset. Maybe because that floppy drive is backwards. Oh, there it goes. So there's some slight problems to work out. 64 megs of RAM. Obviously the floppy drive isn't going to work. And the CMOS battery is dead. Memory test fail. I'm going to fix this floppy drive, and I'll come back and see what happens. Okay, let's see what it does now. That's quite a bit better. That floppy cable, being as old as it is, can go on both ways. So I just put it on backwards both ways. But the 486DX4120 120 is not so much a DX4 as it is a DX3. Like pretty much all of these systems. It still says the floppy disk failed, which is interesting. I don't know if maybe this drive is bad or what. We'll go into setup. It's not going to matter what I set any of these values to. It's just going to reset. But it's a 40 megahertz base clock with a clock tripler, which is what all those DX4s are. I don't know why they call them DX4s rather than DX3s for some reason. Probably to make them seem better. But with a 40 megahertz base clock, these things were actually pretty fast. And this one, which you cannot see, well, you might be able to see the outlines of them. My sunlight is vanishing quickly, but this has some cache memory, so that opens the floodgates for even more performance. I'm going to see if I can at least try and get this thing working. I suspect not. I think I'm probably going to have to replace this floppy drive, because I think it might be bad. And maybe I'll take the faceplate off and put on another one. We'll see. Yep, that was exactly what was wrong. See, I'm a dork. You want to know why? Because I put that floppy cable on backwards in both ends. Which, yes, that will put pin 1 to pin 1, but there's a twist in the cable. And the reason for that twist is to invert the addressing logic so you can determine or differentiate between drive A and drive B for the 3.5-inch drives because they don't have drive select jumpers. Well, if you put the cable on backwards, you put that twist in the wrong place, and logic doesn't work. So it thinks it's drive B. That's why the floppy drive wasn't working. And probably other things, because I noticed it wasn't doing a seek test either. So we've got that figured out at least. I think the hard drive wasn't spinning up before. I don't know, I wasn't paying too much attention to it. But if we push F1 now, what does it do? I think it does a whole lot of nothing. So it might not even boot to the floppy drive. And I think it's locked up. Well, how do I put the brakes on that? Let me see here. Where's my boot floppy? Well, as you can see, I did get it to boot to something. But I did have to switch the floppy drive. I'm not sure if the one is bad or if there's a system problem. I'm leaning towards a system problem because it would only boot with turbo turned off. If I turn turbo on, it just sits there at a blank thing. And obviously it's not going to see the hard drive because, well, it's not configured in the BIOS. If I hit Control-Alt-Delete and I turn turbo on, now watch, this is when it's going to prove that I'm a liar. I just hit F1. Yeah, that's all it does. Doesn't try to boot from the floppy, doesn't really do anything. So, I think that's pretty much it for this, for now. I'm going to have to replace that Dallas module, or sorry, the Odin module, before I really do a whole lot of anything with this, which means I'm going to have to get a module, I'm going to have to get a socket to put on the board, because I'm certainly not going to solder it straight to the board and then have to replace it again. So, well, that works. So, anyway, I think that's probably going to just about do it for this. I might take the hard drive out, put it in something else, see what's on it. But I may just wait, save that for when this machine is actually fully put together. So that's it for this. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. And this is CP666 signing off, and I hope to see you next time. Till then.